Hey, fifth graders, part two. And as I had in the link there, the reading starts on page 25, so make sure you're there. And it starts on troubled times. In 1800, the Sauk and Meskwaki were the strongest tribes along the Mississippi and the rivers that ran into it. White settlers were not allowed to move into Indian land. In fact, the United States Army helped keep away pioneers. 4 years later, in 1804, the United States made a treaty, an agreement with these tribes. Five civil chiefs signed away all the land in Illinois that the tribes owned in return for gifts worth about 2,000, which $2,000 back then, everybody, was a ton of money. The government also promised to pay $600 each year to the Sauk and $400 to the Meskwaki. The tribes were allowed to remain in their homes until the land was mapped out for settlement. Then they must move west of the Mississippi. Many in the tribal council did not like the treaty. Others did not fully understand that they had sold their land. Each spring, for nearly 30 years more, the Sauk returned to Saquanuk and planted their gardens. White settlers, however, were moving closer. They farmed the land and cleared the forests, chasing away the animals that the Indians hunted. As a result, the Native Americans had fewer skins to trade for supplies. So this next bit, everybody, on page 26 and 27 about Chief Black Hawk, the video you're going to watch after this goes into a lot of detail about Black Hawk, but in terms of Iowa Native American tribal chiefs, Black Hawk was probably the most famous. He fought back against the American government and the white settlers who were coming in. So we're not going to read this part. It explains in the video. If you want to read it on your own, though, you're welcome to do that. So I'm going on to the next page, on page 27, page 28. So in 1831, the government ordered the tribes to move west. The Sauk were not to return to Saquanuk anymore. Chief Keokuk advised his people that the time had come to build new villages on the Iowa side of the river. However, the Sauk war chief Black Hawk refused to obey the treaty. When he led his warriors and their families back to Saquanuk the next spring, the government ordered the army to capture him. To escape from the army, some Indians fled to the north, but many were killed. Finally, Black Hawk was captured and put into prison. To punish the Sauk and Meskwaki for their trouble, Black Hawk had caused the government made them sign a new treaty in 1832, selling even more of their land. This time, the United States bought land on the west side of the Mississippi in what is now eastern Iowa. It was called the Black Hawk Purchase, even though Black Hawk was in jail at the time. For this good land, the U.S. government paid the two tribes debts and $20,000 each year for 30 years. They also promised 40 barrels of salt, 40 barrels of tobacco, and some blacksmithing service each year. The Indians were to leave the area by the end of June 1833. Government agents and traders often treated the American Indians unfairly. In 1842, the U.S. government bought another 10 million acres of central Iowa for 10 cents an acre. Later, the land was sold to settlers for $1.25 an acre, and the government kept the difference. The government, not the tribe, picked which Indian chiefs would receive the money on behalf of the tribe. These chiefs were called the money chiefs and had great power as long as they did what the government wanted. Traders who sold goods to the Indians encouraged the money chiefs to buy anything they wanted for themselves. The chiefs were allowed to run up huge bills. When the payment arrived from the government, the agent paid off the money chiefs' debts first. Sometimes there was little left to distribute to the rest of the tribe. Other American Indian leaders wanted the money to go directly to the heads of Indian families. The method of payment and the fact that they had little to say about who would speak for them created bad feelings within the tribes. Traders often cheated the tribes by selling them goods at sky-high prices. For example, they sold mirrors for $30 and dress coats for $60. Sometimes they sold the same item twice by recording the sale twice in their record books and adding both figures to the Indians' bills. When Iowa's new territorial governor, John Chambers, heard about this, he ordered an investigation. The traders had to return to the tribe some of the money they had overcharged for goods. After 1844, the government's annual payment to the tribe went directly to the families, and the money chiefs were not allowed to distribute it. Nevertheless, the record of the dealings with the Indians was not good. The government did not supervise how the money paid for the tribal lands was distributed to Indian families. The American Indians became steadily poorer, Before long, the tribes were forced to sell even more of their land to the American government, which in turn sold it to the settlers for farms. Finally, when all their Iowa land was gone, the Sauk and Meskwaki moved to Kansas. So the next bit, everybody, tribes in western Iowa, also not going to read that because the video goes into some detail on that. So just skipping ahead, everybody. Same with page 32 and 33. The video also talks about that. I'm just going to read that very last bit at the end on page 33 on the bottom right-hand corner. Iowa's history begins with the American Indians who lived here for thousands of years. Hunting, gathering, and growing their food and supplies, that way of life changed when the European traders came. The Indians no longer had to make everything they needed. Then American settlers wanted the land for farming. Before long, most of the American Indian tribes were pushed out of Iowa. Today, only the Meskwaki of Tama County live together on their own land, although Indian families from several tribes live in many Iowa towns, especially Des Moines and Sioux City. Some have given up their Indian traditions, but others still practice tribal customs. So there is a Native American population that does live in Iowa to this day. But what this reading was meant to show you just some of the earliest history of Native Americans, how they lived in Iowa, and how they slowly but surely lost their land in Iowa. And just kind of an unfortunate mark on American history is our American government at the time largely cheated these Native Americans out of their land. I think it's very interesting thinking about how expensive land is today. I think a few years ago in another class, we looked up how expensive an acre of land is in Winnebago County, and I think it was something like $6,000 or $7,000 for an acre of farmland. And back then, we bought that for 10 cents an acre, which again, money back then was even more valuable to where 10 cents wasn't incredibly cheap like it would be today, but 10 cents back then was pretty cheap. And then the government turned around and sold it for $1.25 an acre. So our government, that's kind of a bad mark on our country's history, is we cheated these Native American tribes out of their land, but that is how Iowa came to be. And another little fun fact that you probably didn't know is Iowa is named after one of the first earliest Native American tribes that we know about. So just kind of an interesting fact there. So anyways, what you'll do now is watch this video that goes into some details about the parts of the reading I didn't talk about. The video provides good visuals, which I thought would help you. And then there's one Google Classroom question to answer, and it is just telling me what are 5 core facts you learned about Native American tribes in Iowa. So thanks, 5th graders. Please just watch that last video and have a great rest of your week.